hey, calm down. That nigga walked out and started fucking with my brother. You gonna see me for the rest of your life, bitch. You gonna see me for the rest of your life, bitch. You know we got it on us. We've been quiet for too long, bitch. We've been quiet too long. You pussy ass nigga. You sexy ass nigga. You gonna see me for the rest of your life, bitch. That bitch hungry, bitch. You pussy ass nigga. You should have told her who the fuck we are. Boy, they just beat the white shit. You gonna see pink for the rest of your life, bitch. You should have told Holly who the fuck we were. We've been too quiet, bitch. This is a real trouble, bitch. You confused. You know exactly who the fuck we are. You ruined that girl's life and you killed my sister, bitch.
Damn, how you doing with your bitch ass, boy?
What do you think really happened? Drop your thoughts below and subscribe to the Dark Unveiling for more untold stories.
September 8th, 2025. A crisp Chicago morning settled over the South Loop, sunlight filtering through the gaps of tall apartment buildings, touching the asphalt of the school parking lot in golden streaks. Birds chirped, the faint hum of engines mixing with the laughter of children as parents escorted their little ones to classrooms. Amid this ordinary urban orchestra, Romeca Meeks Blackman sat in her silver sedan, coffee steaming gently in a paper cup. At 31 years old, she was a nursing student, a devoted mother, and someone who had spent her life balancing her ambitions with the everyday responsibilities of parenthood. Today, like every school day, she was focused on a single task: getting her 6-year-old son safely to school. She had packed his lunch, carefully balancing nutrition and preference: a peanut butter sandwich on whole wheat, a sliced apple tucked neatly beside a yogurt cup. And tucked inside the lunchbox, she placed a small note, the kind only a mother could write. A quiet ritual repeated daily. "Have a great day, baby. Mommy loves you." Romeca snapped a quick picture of the note, sharing it to her Instagram story. A simple act of love, a moment of daily joy she wanted to preserve. Friends and family would later look at this image and weep, because it would become the last trace of her life captured in innocence. She kissed her son goodbye, smoothing the collar of his backpack, tucking his hair behind his ears, whispering the words that would echo forever in the hollow chambers of a boy's memory. "I love you." Her son, oblivious to the danger creeping closer, waved and bounded toward the school doors, backpack bouncing with every step. The world for him was simple: love, safety, and the comfort of routine. Romeca exhaled, watching him disappear into the crowd of other children, unaware that within 30 minutes, that morning would fracture, leaving pieces that could never be put together again. Blocks away, a car idled at the edge of the street, its presence seemingly inconspicuous but pregnant with menace. Inside sat Quadaja Johnson, known to friends as Holly, and Carlos Smith. Holly was 6 months pregnant with Carlos's child. Their presence in the area was supposedly coincidental, but fate, or calculation, was anything but. Carlos had a history with Romeca. Protective orders had been filed, boundaries established, yet he was here. The day was set, the stage unknowingly prepared, and the actors oblivious to the tragedy about to unfold. Romeca returned to her car, adjusting the mirror, taking a sip of coffee. In her mind, everything was ordinary. She had appointments to keep, a nursing class to attend later, and errands to run. Yet the calm of that morning belied the storm gathering mere feet away. The air was punctuated with the sound of doors shutting, engines revving, and the faint laughter of children. Parents chatted in small clusters, some waving to friends, some absorbed in their phones, none, anticipating the violence that was about to crash into their peaceful routine. Then came the first signs of confrontation. Carlos's car slowed to a stop near hers. Romeca's eyes met the familiar face of the father of her son. Recognition sparked immediate tension in her chest. She had sought protection from him before, yet there he was, arriving precisely at the time she was dropping off her child. Beside him sat Holly, a woman Romeca had never met, pregnant, her presence a living question mark of danger. The distance between them closed. The air thickened with unspoken threats, jealousy, and past grievances that had long simmered beneath the surface. Witnesses would later describe the moment as electric, charged with an invisible tension that anyone could feel but few could explain. Parents on the curb began to notice the intensity of the exchange, a confrontation unfolding before them like a slow-motion tragedy. Romeca exited her car, instinctively placing herself between her son's safety and the approaching storm. Arms crossed, posture defensive but not aggressive. She was not here to fight. She was here to survive, to complete her morning errand and move on. Yet fate, manipulation, and malevolence had other plans. Holly stepped out of the car. Pregnant and determined, she advanced. Her presence was deliberate, calculated. Carlos followed, not to intervene, not to de-escalate, but to involve himself in the confrontation. The protective orders, the stalking claims, the simmering resentment, all converged in a single, horrifying moment. Witnesses later described Carlos swinging a car door at Romeca, attempting to trap her in her vehicle. Then, the unthinkable. He grabbed her by the throat, a chokehold that immobilized her, leaving her defenseless. Romeca struggled, her instincts screaming at her to fight back, to push away, to breathe, to survive. The world narrowed to this: a man holding her, a woman retrieving a weapon, and a mother trapped in the middle of a nightmare she did not anticipate. Holly, meanwhile, walked back to her car, her unborn child in the back seat, and retrieved a handgun legally registered in her name. She returned to the scene, each step a choice, each step sealing a fate no one would ever forget. And then, the shots rang out. The first bullet struck Romeca in the face, precise, deliberate. She staggered, but did not immediately collapse. The pause that followed was deafening. A pregnant woman assessing the aftermath of the first shot before firing two more. 3 bullets, 3 irreversible decisions. The street erupted into chaos. Parents screamed. A child cried. Phones rang frantically to 911. Yet Holly and Carlos, according to witnesses, celebrated. A fist bump. A moment of triumph captured in the stark contrast of life extinguishing in front of them. Romeca fell to the asphalt. Blood pooled, her body still warm, her life ending on a canvas of concrete that would forever be stained with tragedy. The ordinary morning had transformed into an execution witnessed by strangers, a child, and a city too numb to immediately react. To understand the horror of that morning, one must first understand the tangled web of relationships that preceded it. Romeca Meeks was not a stranger to conflict. Her life had been marked by careful planning, a focus on family, and a desire to protect her young son from the instability that often surrounds fractured relationships. But the world of adult relationships is rarely neat, and the presence of jealousy, obsession, and fear can twist the simplest encounters into tragedy. Romeca's history with Carlos Smith was complex. They had once shared a bond, a brief relationship, but it ended on bitter terms. Romeca had filed a protective order against him months prior, citing harassment, threats, and a growing pattern of intimidation. Court documents detail incidents where Carlos had shown up uninvited, sent threatening messages, and made veiled promises of retaliation. To any outsider, this should have been a clear warning. Yet, like many tragedies, human behavior rarely conforms to common sense. Carlos was not a passive figure. Friends describe him as volatile, prone to fits of jealousy and manipulation. He had grown increasingly obsessed with Romeca's life, tracking her routines, monitoring social media, and occasionally reaching out through mutual acquaintances. Protective orders, in his eyes, were obstacles, not boundaries. The legal system had constrained him, but it had not broken him. nor had it quelled the desire to control and intimidate. Then there was Holly Johnson, a woman whose involvement complicated every narrative. 6 months pregnant with Carlos's child, she was, in many ways, both a participant and an enabler. Her own motivations were murky, driven by loyalty, fear, or perhaps a belief that violence was justified to protect her unborn child, or her relationship with Carlos. Witness accounts from neighbors and friends paint a picture of a woman conflicted yet decisive, a mother-to-be capable of premeditated action, who, under pressure, made the choice to arm herself. These two individuals together formed a dangerous alliance. Carlos provided the history, the emotional volatility, and the manipulative strategies. Holly provided the lethal means, the readiness to act, and the willingness to cross the final line. Romeca, in contrast, brought love, vigilance, and maternal instinct, but she lacked the foresight to anticipate the specific combination of danger they would bring on that morning. Family members describe Romeca as cautious but not paranoid. She lived in a small apartment near her son's school, keeping a low profile. Friends remember her as kind, organized, and committed. She had routines that included morning school drop-offs, evening study sessions, and weekly calls to her mother and best friend. Yet even in these routines, subtle disruptions had begun to appear. Cars, following her, strange texts, and once, the unsettling sound of a man's voice echoing threats in her voicemail. These were small alarms, easy to rationalize away, until rationalization was no longer an option. Legal documents from the protective order reveal the stark contrast between perception and reality. Romeca had sought to protect herself through legal channels. The court had mandated a restraining order, yet enforcement is often a slow, reactive process. Threats escalated faster than the law could respond. Holly's possession of a firearm was legal, but in the context of previous threats and harassment, it created a dangerous cocktail of opportunity, intent, and lethality. Friends and family recount incidents that illuminate the psychology of the trio. One close friend of Romeca's described her growing anxiety in the weeks before the tragedy. She would check the mirrors on her car, glance down the street, double-check the locks, but she always said, "I have to be brave for him," her son. She knew she had to keep life normal for him. Meanwhile, acquaintances of Carlos and Holly describe arguments over jealousy, blame, and control, which often escalated to threats, name-calling, and, according to some, the casual discussion of violent solutions to perceived slights. Witnesses would later testify that the couple, Carlos and Holly, had been tracking Romeca's morning routines with precision. The day she was killed was not an accident. Video footage from a nearby convenience store shows Carlos's car circling the block minutes before the murder, Holly seated beside him, her expression unreadable, her hands resting near the firearm she would later use. Observers described the air as tense, almost cinematic in its foreboding. Two adults poised to execute a plan, a mother oblivious, and a child caught in the periphery of danger. Even the protective orders, intended as shields, became twisted instruments. One legal analyst described it as weaponized paperwork. The court had offered Romeca a line of defense, but Carlos's disregard of these protections rendered them ineffective in practice. Holly's intervention, arming herself and stepping into the confrontation, illustrates how legal boundaries can be manipulated or bypassed when individuals act outside the law. The tragic reality is that systems designed to protect are only as effective as the willingness of individuals to respect them. The dynamics between the three were a study in psychological tension. Romeca embodied resilience and normalcy. Carlos, coercion and obsession. Holly, intervention and lethality. Premeditation is often defined in legal terms as a conscious decision to commit an act of violence. In this case, every witness account, every video frame, every message exchanged pointed toward careful consideration, even calculation. Yet self-defense was claimed, adding a layer of legal ambiguity that would later dominate courtroom proceedings. By the morning of September 8th, the tension had reached its zenith. Small decisions made in preceding weeks, routine phone calls, minor threats, casual jealousy, compounded into a volatile setup. The intersection of maternal instinct, obsessive jealousy, and premeditated violence created a perfect storm. Romeca's predictable routine became the point of attack. Holly's legal possession of a firearm became the instrument, and Carlos's manipulations provided the spark. Family accounts reflect the emotional complexity of the aftermath. Romeca's mother described sleepless nights, haunted by what-if scenarios. Her son struggled with understanding absence, asking repeatedly why mommy did not come home. Psychologists who later worked with the child detailed early trauma symptoms, anxiety, hypervigilance, and sudden outbursts, classic reactions to witnessing or being proximal to violent events. The child's life, once predictable and sheltered, became a landscape of grief, fear, and memory fragments. Even within the courtroom, the dynamics persisted. Defense attorneys emphasized self-defense and protective instincts. Prosecutors highlighted premeditation, the calculated presence at the scene, and the evidence of prior harassment and threats. Witnesses were asked to recount every detail: the exact number of bullets, the sequence of events, the positioning of vehicles and people, and the demeanor of the perpetrators. Every narrative was scrutinized for inconsistencies, motives, and psychological subtext. Society watched, fascinated, and horrified. Discussions erupted over the weaponization of protective orders, the efficacy of law enforcement in preventing domestic violence, and the moral culpability of individuals acting in complex emotional contexts. Opinion pieces debated the ethical lines between self-preservation and criminal accountability. Social media amplified every aspect, making Romeca's tragedy both a cautionary tale and a public spectacle. The backstory, the personalities, and the pre-existing tensions all converged into the catastrophic event witnessed on that crisp morning. Romeca's simple errand, a school drop-off, a cup of coffee, a note in a lunchbox, intersected with jealousy, premeditation, and societal shortcomings. What should have been ordinary became a devastating lesson in how human behavior, legal gaps, and psychological complexities can collide with lethal consequences. The morning sun had barely begun its climb over the horizon, spilling golden light across the quiet suburban streets. For Romeca Meeks, it was another ordinary day, or at least, it should have been. She had woken early as she always did, making sure her son was dressed, fed, and ready for school. Her routine was precise: pack the lunchbox, check homework, ensure the backpack was zipped, and grab her own essentials: a coffee, keys, and phone. Her mind wandered briefly to the protective order she had renewed the week before. A small, nagging worry lingered, but she dismissed it. She had survived threats before. She would survive today. Romeca stepped out of her apartment building, her son trailing behind her, his small hand clasped in hers. The air smelled faintly of dew and early blooms from nearby gardens. Across the street, a car idled. Its engine was quiet, but its presence was deliberate. Holly Johnson sat in the passenger seat, visibly tense, her hand brushing over the firearm in the glove compartment. She adjusted the rearview mirror, catching the reflection of Romeca walking down the sidewalk. Every detail was noted: her pace, her posture, the gentle sway of her hair in the wind. Inside the car, Carlos Smith's eyes flicked between the rearview mirror and the street ahead. His face was a mixture of impatience and cold calculation. He had mapped this morning meticulously: Romeca's path from apartment to school, the timing of her son's arrival, the proximity of neighbors, the minimal foot traffic. Everything aligned perfectly for what they had planned. At the same time, neighbors noticed something unusual: the hum of an idling engine where there should have been none, a woman's silhouette shifting restlessly in the passenger seat, and a man's gaze locked on a single target. To anyone else, it might have seemed mundane. But for those paying attention, tension crackled in the air like static before a storm. Romeca approached her car, unaware of the danger tracking her every move. She unlocked the doors, helped her son into the passenger seat, and reached for the keys to her own car parked nearby. Holly's grip tightened on the gun, and Carlos quietly murmured directions. In that brief pause, the universe seemed to hold its breath. Then it happened. Gunshots echoed, tearing through the morning calm. Shell casings clattered against the pavement, a stark punctuation to the sudden violence. Romeca collapsed, clutching her son instinctively, shielding him as best she could. The child screamed, confusion and fear mixing into a sound no parent should ever hear. From the witness perspective, it was chaos. Neighbors poured out of homes, phones trembling in their hands as they dialed 911. One neighbor later testified that Holly had stepped out of the car, firearm still in hand, issuing commands that no one fully comprehended in the panic. Meanwhile, Carlos remained near the car, a tense, silent figure, eyes darting to ensure no interruption from the outside world. Video footage captured the sequence in harrowing clarity. It showed the deliberate movements, Holly's positioning, the timing of the first shot, and Romeca's desperate attempt to shield her son. Analysis of the footage later revealed the chilling precision, moments between shots, the trajectory of each bullet, and the clear visibility of intent. The evidence strongly suggested premeditation rather than a split-second act of self-defense. Yet, in court, perspectives would clash. Defense attorneys argued that Holly acted to protect herself and the unborn child she carried, claiming she feared a confrontation with Romeca had escalated beyond verbal threats. Prosecutors countered with detailed timelines, highlighting prior harassment, prior threats, and the calculated positioning that left little room for doubt about intent. The debate would hinge on split-second decisions frozen in time, amplified by the inexorable clarity of modern surveillance. I want to welcome you to the channel. We look for the truth in the shadows of cold cases and closed files. If you value this kind of deep-dive investigation, please consider subscribing. And as we begin this journey together, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Whether you're joining us from the United States, Canada, Australia, or anywhere else in the world, leave a comment below. It helps us remember that these stories, though local, touch hearts across the globe. Back on the street, the aftermath was immediate and visceral. Paramedics arrived within minutes, their sirens cutting through the stunned silence of the neighborhood. Romeca, still conscious but gravely wounded, clutched her son, her last thoughts a mixture of fear, protective instinct, and disbelief. "Stay safe," she whispered, barely audible, as her son screamed in panic. First responders would later describe her composure as remarkable under such dire circumstances. A mother's courage shining even in the face of imminent death. Holly and Carlos were arrested shortly after, their capture caught on body cams and dash cams of responding officers. Every detail, from Holly's calm explanation of self-defense to Carlos's nearly passive compliance, was scrutinized by law enforcement and media alike. For investigators, the sequence of events pointed to meticulous preparation, a chilling choreography that transformed an ordinary morning into an irreversible tragedy. Physical evidence further cemented the narrative. Ballistics confirmed the trajectory of the bullets. Shell casings matched the firearm in Holly's possession, and phone records revealed communications between the two prior to the attack. Protective orders, intended as barriers, were circumvented, underscoring a broader societal challenge. How laws meant to prevent violence can be rendered ineffective when confronted by intent and opportunity. The emotional impact on Romeca's family, particularly her young son, was devastating. Psychologists later documented early signs of trauma, nightmares, sudden outbursts, and hypervigilance. Her mother struggled with guilt and anger, questioning what could have been done to prevent the tragedy. Relatives recounted the quiet bravery of attempting to maintain normalcy for the child, creating routines that reminded him of his mother while grappling with the gaping void left by her absence. Courtroom tensions ran high. Prosecutors painted a picture of calculated malice supported by surveillance, footage, witness accounts, and expert testimony. Defense attorneys leaned heavily on claims of self-preservation and the stress of impending motherhood. The jury would be left to untangle complex psychological and legal threads, weighing fear against intent and protection against premeditation. Plea deals were discussed but ultimately rejected in favor of a full trial, a testament to the gravity of the case and the public demand for accountability. Societal implications were immediate and far-reaching. Commentators debated the weaponization of protective orders, the responsibilities of legal systems to enforce them, and the ethical limits of self-defense. For every law meant to protect victims, there remained a question: how do we ensure it cannot be manipulated to justify tragedy? In this case, those questions were not theoretical. They were painfully real, etched into every testimony, video frame, and shell casing collected as evidence. By the end of that morning, the neighborhood was forever altered. The street where children once played freely now bore the weight of loss, fear, and vigilance. Witnesses described lingering tension, neighbors checking locks repeatedly, and parents holding their children a little tighter. Romeca's son would grow up carrying the imprint of that day, a memory shaped by courage, loss, and the incomprehensible intersection of human emotion and violence.